Thanks for all those interesting questions that you have asked. Some of it I'll try to, because it also gives me what is the frame of mind most of the participants here are in, and let me see whether I can bring about some resolution towards that. One question that you had asked for, whether there are coaches for these subjects like career and all that. I remember a site, I don't have the spelling correct. I'll give it later on. I think it's called nui.com. Spelling, I have a little bit of a doubt. Nui.com. It's a platform where consultants make themselves available, and people who want, coaches make themselves available on different subjects, and people who want to be coached, they can choose and say, I want to coach for this, and that organization allots the coaches. The rates are also quite fair, I think. So that is one area. I'll give you the address a little later, and also I'll give you some names of books also, what you can do. But one thing that I'd like to call you back to is that this session is on, helping young people to identify their call and purpose in life, making use of this particular tool called, Life Purpose Pyramid tool, which uses one half as shape, which developed by Eric Ries and mentioned in Purpose Driven Life, one half of that. And the other half is developing strategies to achieve that mission in life. Now, how you're going to help youths to make use of this tool and realize their goals in life. So the whole thing is very specific. So many questions that you had asked would have had a full answer if this course was full. And when I say the course is full, means it takes at least 6 months to complete this course with at least 2-hour sessions every week, right? And between weeks, some exercise to do also. So what I had pulled out is very specific for, managing the youth using these tools alone. Right? Okay. If you're interested in something more and all that, I can give you some more details for to develop yourselves. Yeah. Now, let me get on screen. Now, the topic that I'm going to go through is now group coaching, and why the subject of group coaching is brought in is, now your tool, this Life Purpose Pyramid tool, has at least 7 group sessions. If you're supposing in your church or you are being invited to conduct this, say for, we had conducted it in Karunya almost for 1,000 people. So then we broke them into small groups and we had group discussions going on for internalization. So you have to have a group facilitation skill and how exactly we operate. So that aspect we are going to look into now. Basically, because this requires, this Life Purpose Pyramid requires group interventions. Okay. Great. Now, group coaching. Let me see. First, I'm going to give you an outline of what is group coaching, how it is done, and what are the group processing skills that you need to have. And then, if time permits, I will bring the focus into this Life Purpose Pyramid tool, how you're going to make use of it over there. So that's going to be the structure of this. So group life coaching, is growing rapidly in popularity, particularly within the business community. Now it is spilling over to the other areas also. Initially, it started with the business community because it's becoming very cheap. So a course which can go on for 6 months or so, you may be just paying about $10,000 and getting a normal course. It will cost you maybe for 40,000-50,000 rupees. So it's becoming popular and in all areas, especially in the area of online coaching, plenty of it is available. Now, group life coaching can be unbelievably powerful. Why I say that? The reason is because you're having various resources inside the team. Various people are bringing their life resources into it. So, however, the central principle of the team should always be that the whole is going to be greater than the sum of its parts. So it's not the individual benefits, the team as a whole, the group as a whole benefits, but then definitely what you could have got as an individual to be coached will be much more than when you are going through a group coaching process. This I'm saying from the angle of the participant. Now, in other words, each member of the group has something special to bring to the table. So apart from your coach, somebody else is also bringing you material onto the table. So that's another very powerful, and this is an extras that you get in a group coaching. Okay, now numbers. Typically for group coaching, you would want between 6 and 10 people in the group. This is normally, but I would say 5 would be the best, 7 okay, 10 fine. In this group intervention model, we have a norm that is as a part of the Indian Society for Applied Behavioral Sciences, where we do a lot of group process interventions and training. We say if there are going to be 10 people, then you have to have 2 coaches or 2 consultants inside the group. So one will be an active, the other one will be supportive. So that's what they say. So 10 will be a little large if you're going to do intensive coaching. So some coaches feel more comfortable with smaller numbers. The reason, the size of the class determines how you split your time between the participants and deal in more depth with each individual's situation and needs. So if there are too many, then your attention to each member decreases. If there's a small and contained group, your attention for each member really goes up. Typically, any group coaching program should have a theme. So this is very important. You have to note this down. In our life purpose, it's going to be, identifying your call and mission in life. So that's going to be the first part, and then the execution strategy. Right. So you can even break that into 2. First is the identifying the call, the next one and the mission. The next one is the execution strategy. So you have to have a title for it. So which means that everybody converges to that title. So everybody knows that this is the purpose for which we are there. So people do not have varying ideas in their mind. So that's very important. When you get a group coaching, give the title, and sometimes even call the group by that name. Group process norms to keep in focus. This is important. Now, you have to identify and say that each member has a role to play within the group framework. So you cannot remain silent and just be a receiver of what other people give. So as a norm, should say, being open and sharing, it will be one of the primary norms, right? And all members are equally responsible for the group. So that will also speak about the attendance. The group has an identity as a whole. If 5 members are from the group, it's 5 members. So I have a responsibility as 5 member. If I pull out, then I'm destroying the group. So each one has an equal responsibility. Then communication, the group should develop an overall style. How do you speak? How do you exchange? So the permission to speak, when to speak, so the communication part. Ideas, free exchange of ideas should be possible. Self-control, all members should demonstrate self-control of expression. Now, some time ago, I was a participant in a group, high profile group, and the facilitator was really high profile. The facilitator was supposed to be an American from the National Training Laboratory of US, but last minute, his wife met with an accident in India, and therefore he was replaced by Dr. Uday Parikh. Dr. Uday Parikh is also called as the father of HR movement in the country, and he was a professor from Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. To me, I was really happy. But there was one boy there, he was an assistant manager from a company. He said, "You guys are cheats you show the face of a white man, and then once we have paid and come in, you're bringing in another person. He hijacked the group for 2 hours, showing his anger. The group had not even started, So such occasions, right at the start, we norm how we should be able to contain our expressions of anger and all that. So this is not a T group. It's not a sensitivity group training. It's a coaching group. So self-control becomes important. The group environment should be a safe for experimentation and disclosure. When I'm disclosing something, I disclose in the group something personal to me. So there has to be a norm that whatever is shared in the group will only belong to the group. It will not go out. Right? The identity of such a sharing should be available only when the same members come together. Otherwise, it should not go out. So those agreements have to be there. Then self-esteem, allowing members to appreciate their own inputs and values. The space becomes the place becomes a space for encouraging people and discovering their estimate of themselves. Empowerment, group goal setting and achieving in a supportive environment is the process that the group will be empowered with, which means every person commits that, this is the goal that we are going to achieve. Apart from the coach, every member also will be supportive to the other members. So it's a safe environment, it is an empowered environment, and the assurance of reaching the goal is there. So now these are the process norms that we have to set in focus. Okay? Now, this is something that we have to look into, group extremes, when you're setting up norms. So at one extreme, the group can be unstructured, with focus being on emotional responses. This type of group calls for sensitivity and empathy. At the other extreme is the task-oriented group, where specific goals exist. So one is completely unstructured. You can behave whichever way you want. So T group sessions operate like that. Now you can show your anger, you can express your gratitude, your love. So T groups operate like that. So that's an extreme level. Now you can't have it like that over here. At the same time, you can't have it highly structured, with a steel framework. You have to be this, you can't get out of this. So that sort of a norm also cannot. So how do we structure it between these two extremes? There are many variations. So you have to know that emphasis should lie equally between the two extremes. A no-nonsense, get on with it type of approach will fail. As will also an overly touchy-feely approach, which lacks practicality, that also. So you have to see how you're going to balance. Now, group building skills. Now, the group as a whole needs 3 areas of group building skills. The coming together of which produce group dynamics and increase the likelihood of success. These skills can be placed into 3 types. So you can note this down. This is very specific. Now, when people come together, they're bringing in their thoughts. So it should become a space where the thoughts could be expressed and explored. So that is one area where the group also should be encouraged to think. The second is also the expressions of feelings, not the extremes, but then, the sadness or the disturbance that happens, people should feel free to give an expression to that. And then the action taking. I'm going to explain each of this to you. Now, thinking skills is the ability to be aware of yourself without dwelling on your weakness. So, this is something that we are encouraging the group members to be at. Now, the material that I'm supplying to you here, you will use questions to help them to explore that. One typical question is, do you find your self-blame affecting this thought process? Is that where you're coming from? A question. Suddenly the person realizes, becomes aware of himself without judging himself or herself. So these questions that I'm giving you, you can use it as facilitative, convert it into facilitative questions to help in the development of the group to achieve the goals. So realizing that you are responsible for your own happiness and your own goals. This is the state and the condition that we're talking about, the participants. So realizing you are responsible for your own happiness and your own goals. So supposing somebody brings in, a block, that disturbs him, you're going to ask a question. So who should take responsibility for it? Is it the group's responsibility or is it your responsibility? Who should be working on it? So now this, unravels the person's responsibility and what he should do. Accepting that you can make mistakes. So supposing somebody says something and, oh, I feel so bad about it and I'm so sorry. The facilitative question would be, are you finding it difficult to accept that you can make mistakes? Is a spotless self is what you are looking out for. Now, these questions, we call it as hypothesis in group intervention. So you make a statement. If it hits the person takes it to use it. Otherwise, the person can throw it off also. You need not keep on pushing it. You just raise a question and leave it. Okay? When you're addressing one person, somebody else also can pick it up and find a growth in that interventional statement that you're making. Being non-judgmental of others. When somebody is passing on a judgmental statement on another group member, so you can intervene. What do you think about the statement that you just now made? Other people can also be alert in the group and say, I think he was judging that person. Right? So these are facilitative questions, and each of these questions can create growth in the person. Being able to ask for help. Somebody is struggling, within, and you turn and say, Ramesh, are you finding it difficult to, accept that you need help? Is that what happens in your life, in the job, at home? Right. So this is an existential struggle that the person has, and you're making an interventional question. So having self-motivational and being capable of empowering others. So one of the advantages that you have in group coaching is that people who can make facilitative statements that can empower other people or create growth prospects in other people. So you need to encourage that also. So that's why the group coaching power is much more than individual coaching powers. So then, and being able to listen. Okay, so you may have the skill, but within the group, an interaction is taking place. The other person is very quick to answer. Then you can intervene and say, what do you think is happening here? Now he wants to say something. Yeah. And then say, sorry, I think I have to be listening a little more. Yeah, you said it. So these are facilitative questions that you give. Being aware of your self-beliefs. So they bring in their self-beliefs into the fore and push it on others. So you can have interventional questions to discover it is a very self-oriented belief. It need not be presented to others, or it needs to be re-examined for one's own self also. Yeah. The next one is the feeling skills. Now, you will find some members very tense in the group. So maybe after you see, supposing the group session is for an hour and a half, and you see the person for 15 minutes, you can look at that person and say, Asha, is something disturbing you? Why will you say that? I find you very tense. I think I've been bothered about this. Would you like to talk about it? Right. So you help the person to release. Having empathy. Sometimes group members, one towards another, may be missing out on empathy and come out hard on others. So you sensitize them to cultivate empathy, right? By just asking a question. Did you really understand what that person was trying to express? Would you like to know how she felt when you answered like this? So there's a discovery of empathy that takes place. Being able to appreciate other members. So you encourage people. I mean, don't you think it really required guts to say that? Can we appreciate that? Right? So you encourage a person who's taken up confidence to talk something or to come out and share something. You acknowledge that and make others also to acknowledge. So able to disclose personal information. So this one is you have to create a facilitative environment where people can feel that this is a safe place. We are able to establish that, then disclosing personal information become. So this one right at the start, when you're doing the norm setting, you have to work it out and say that, we are going to create an atmosphere like this. And how many of you are ready to commit and keep your word, saying that whatever is being disclosed over here will remain the property of this group, which means nobody else owns that information. So it's an agreement that is created. So you create a safe environment for people to share personal information. Now coming to the third aspect. Now these are all action-oriented area. Now there is a question which is existential reality of the group, and they are stuck. Now you say, why don't we explore? What do you think about it? What are your personal struggles associated with that? So you can also say that a person commits to say that I would like to go ahead, plan like this. Fine. So when you're planning that, what do you think is going to happen? So all those questions will be action facilitated, right? Making the group to think about what are the next steps that we do and what happens when we work on those areas. Being able to communicate with other members. Now, Sharon, is there anything that you want to say? Because I got a message, you raise your hand.
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. So being able to communicate with other members. Now, people who are shy, people who are diffident, you create an atmosphere to experiment in that team, to reach out to others, to communicate with other members. So they train themselves. It's an action orientation where they are able to overcome their diffidence, their shyness, their reticence in talking out in group formats. So you create an atmosphere for that. And being assertive. Sometimes people will quickly withdraw when they're making a point, when somebody raises. So being assertive, how I would explain it is, you're not emotional. There is no fight flight associated with that. You are more rational, you're more cognitive. So when you are presenting that subject, when somebody makes a mockery of it, you're not upset. When make a negative comment about it, you're not upset. So this is another area that can be looked into on the emotional side, being assertive. Then making decisions effectively. So how they going to make the next steps decision, between this session and the next session, and people who took a decision and did not, go about doing it. So working on them to take effective decisions. So this is another action area we'll be looking into. Sustaining positive relationships with other members. People who are not comfortable with relationships, people who have come from a lot of, negative baggage. So this becomes an atmosphere where sustained positive relationship with other members, you facilitate that to happen over here. And also completing tasks. Now, rather than being in an individual coaching, taking up a task and then doing it in a group setting, the commitment could be more. So people who are unable to do that in a group context, you should be able to encourage them working on tasks. There are people who are always evasive. They don't commit themselves fully. So here you work it out for them to take decisions completed. Setting goals also. So in setting goals, there will be micro goals that you do, and there is a short-term goals and the long-term goals. Goals which are taking, as I said, focus action from one session to another session, or for 2 sessions, those setting of goals also, and the long-term goals. Now, all these are action-oriented facilitation that we have to look into. So, so you had the feeling one, and now you're having the action one. Okay, now this is a lot. Facilitator's role, I'm saying how you have to work on yourself, is to assist the group forming process. So this will minimize any competition and conflict between differing members. When you're setting the group, what will be the ground rules? So when the group initially comes together, members require boundaries to be set so that they know what is expected of them and what to expect of the facilitators. It is at this point, generally during the first group meeting, where power struggles often take place and conflicts ensue. So you talk about the time where everybody will come in, the time that we will close, how much of space a person can occupy in terms of time when he or she talks. So now these aspects are set in. Some members will attempt to take over the group. This constantly happens, a dominating type where others will not get any space, and also the person wants to prove his or her point. So when that happens, others will try to withdraw. So this is another aspect you have to keep in mind. When a person is very overwhelming or dominating, we have to facilitate to help him. First is to help him realize what he's doing to the group, and also connect whether this is happening in life also, and then setting the ground rule of how we can work over here. After this initial stage, members will begin to get to know each other, to take responsibility for themselves and their own learning, and to share a developing trust, and to begin to support each other. So initially there will be problems, but then that's where your skill. But initial reconciliation, if it is not done, the group will continue with many of these, what we call as unfinished processes. As the group progresses further, right, each member will develop their own role within the group. So developing group skills. So within groups, the social skills, and also self-esteem, all this will be happening in the group. An ideal group will travel through 4 stages of development. So this, I think you're aware of. It's called Tuckman's stages of group development, where Tuckman, a group process specialist, had discovered this, and this is very powerful, and for us to have a knowledge about this. So the first one is called the forming stage. Now, finding one's place in the group. Now, people are not known to each other, right? And they'll try to dominate. Sometimes there will be actions of independence or high levels of dependency. They'll be looking at only the group coach for answers, and uncertain about what things are. So that will be the forming stage. Now, in the forming stage, when things are not clear, what happens is storming takes place, conflicts over power and position. So many times, even in life situations, when groups come together, when organizations comes together, when they do not have proper norming, a proper forming, there are storms, conflicts are there, fight, flight situations, conditions, you see. Same thing will happen within your group also. And don't be surprised if the group terminates within the second or third, saying that, don't think we can go ahead with this group. So it becomes very important at the forming, how exactly you set the ground. And once that is done, the storming also becomes your diagnosis for the unattended areas which you did not foresee in the forming time. So therefore, you will take a relook at it, and then you create norms of behavior. So we saw in the start, now how each area you have you'll be norming those areas. Let me I think the first slide that I showed, this one, identity, responsibility, communication, ideas, what you can handle, self-control, safety, which means information security of what is being shared, esteems of people, putting down one another is not acceptable, empowerment, you work towards, enhancing other people, and thus you enhance yourself. Now, these group norms becomes very important. So in the norming stage, once you set this, then you see what happens. So then what happens is you see the performing taking place, people working together successfully. So this is a stage within the first two levels, in the first two group sessions, you should be able to have come to the norming level. And from the third session onwards, there should be a performing that takes place. If you're really good, you will set it up right at the first one itself. The entire process of forming, storming, norming will be done in the first session itself. And from the second session onwards, your group goes towards a growth orientation. So these are the group development stages. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to take 5-10 minutes to see where we are going to apply this into our while doing the instrument. Okay, before that, yeah, sorry. This is the first one that we saw. What I want to say is, while you're working on the group, do not forget this basic structure, which we saw in the first one. With the group, you have to establish the context for coaching, why you're here, what is going to be your goal, and writing that down and saying that when we have reached this, that is the time the group will terminate. So, and the group's name also will be based upon that theme, and what will be the direction, how we'll be going about doing that process. So the norms also get set by the second stage. The third stage will be the regular facilitation, learning group by group, and finally the closure that you have. So these 4 stages should be kept in mind, and it also indicates the movement of the group. Sorry, no question. I'll come to the questions later. Now, this I'm talking in terms of when you're going to do the group work. Now, there will be how you will work with the group is, it's like this. When you're using the instrument, first would be the action. You really write down what is required, what the tool gives you to answer. After writing it down, you break out into the breakout sessions to share what has been done. So that is where your group coaching becomes important, how you facilitate. You will see how this is being done during the next 2 days. But when you are running these workshops, you can set up your own time because we are doing it all contained within 3 hours. But supposing you set it up for over 1 month or over 6 sessions, over 7 sessions, each session will be an hour and a half, then you have a lot more time for your group facilitation activities. So this session of group coaching originally was thought about for understanding the construct of the training and how the virtual breakout session will be done in it. Yeah. So this is going to happen. So I'm not going to repeat. What are going to be the deliverables? You're going to go through the process and you're going to learn when you're going to do it for the other youths. What are going to be the deliverables each session? Going to be 7 sessions. And there are certain sessions which are very, very critical. You have to be sure what sort of outputs are expected and how do you work it out and how do you manage it in group. So when you're going through in the next 2 weeks, you will understand those. So basic facilitation skill, you have to understand that's what has been done for you. Okay. Understanding group roles. See, there's also something else that you need to understand and tell group roles. Say, you have to have timekeeping. There are time boundaries. That's number 1. Number 2, there is also gatekeeping. This is also another group role. That is, when you are talking, you should not veer out of the subject because you have definitive goals to work on. You have definitive focus actions to work on. So gatekeeping will be another aspect of the group roles. Number 3 will be everybody have to maintain a journal and write down what they are doing. So the scribing activity also is another group role. Now, these 3 group roles are very important. People have to commit themselves to it. Sometimes we also appoint people to, one will be a timekeeper, the other one will be a gatekeeper. Of course, the scribe activity of writing down, it's your personal activity. So we have to ensure that these roles are taking place in the team. Sorry, the role is so you have to understand there are totally 7 sessions. You will be going through it now. 6 full sessions and 7th with an interface to the coaching. This is what is important. I want to share with you. Now, your major coaching aspect starts after the tool gets over because the growth aspect is introduced in the 7th session. The person takes a decision and creates an action plan. Right. Now, to work out this action plan, we'll have something called PACE. To work out this action plan, just like GRACE, you have a PACE. To work out this action plan, they have to go through a coaching. So that relationship, whether it'll go for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, you have to look into how you're going to do it. So normally in a short session, when we do a session for 1 hour, we give a concept session to understand the instrument, then 20 minutes for doing your workout and 20 minutes will be the group session. But now this is what will happen when you are working it out. But when you are conducting it for other people, you can enlarge this space because it's too short. Now, group, this I already shared with you. Now, the prerequisite is if you're not yet done, if you can do it tonight, reading through the full workbook, answering it, you will have a knowledge level when you come in for tomorrow. Now, the biblical framework on which this instrument is based is that we all are aware of 2 Peter 1, 10 and 11. So the first one talks about making your calling and election sure. The 11th and the 10th verse. The 11th verse is a very, very powerful verse, which says, if you will get to know your call and accomplish that call, one is you will never fail in life, you won't stumble. And you will receive a rich welcome, which means a VIP welcome into the eternal kingdom of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. In other words, you will be a VIP in heaven when you fulfill your call on this planet. Now, this was a very astounding verse which spoke to me, and that's the reason, as one of the major calls in my life, I've taken it on myself that I will help youths, where I've set a target of at least touching the lives of 10 million youths, right? directly or indirectly, so that they are able to find their worth and call in life and fulfill it. So this is the understanding and the prerequisite based on which we are doing this instrument. And when you're doing a group facilitation, you keep that in mind. So this you will see tomorrow. The instrument also has a 4D. You unravel your purpose, you articulate it in words, then you schematize. You convert it into a mission and then plan your strategy, and then you execute your plan. This deploy part is the place where your coaching skills will come in to help the youths. So the discover, describe, design is all structured. So it's almost a straight case. But after that is over, deployment and the person to execute the call, you have to work with the person for at least a brief period. It could even be a year. I don't know why it's repeating. It's going in circles. Oh, sorry, I think there's a group need a reason to be together. This I didn't take it earlier. Make the objectives clear, what sessions are going to deliver. Then duration, this I leave it to you. Now you're wise enough to decide how you're going to work it out. So make the decision to be owned by the participants, asking for the commitment. These all will be what we say agreement or ground setting before you start a group. Time duration for each session, and keep it to that time. Don't spill over. All this we've seen more than that, I think. So along with the other norms, even punctuality would be something that we have to look into. And participants should not criticize each other. When there's somebody sharing that this is the goal that I want, I think I will be doing it like this. They're sharing it. Someone else should not say, how do you say that? I don't think this way will be, don't you think this way will be better? I don't think that will be possible in our country. Now, right at the start, you say that these are going to be not facilitating. So these questions you avoid. It's a part of a norm, you set this. Now, you also talk about what happens if a person absents. What is the condition with which a person will absent himself? Because if the person absents and has not missed out that session, how that is going to be taken care of? Allow the group to create a norm for themselves. Confidentiality, of course, we have seen. Avoid abstract concept-based discussions. Limit your, you talk from experience. Supposing a person says, supposing it were to happen like this. I mean, that's not your experience, right? Has it happened to you in your earlier part of your life? Then you talk about it. There was a time when I decided like this, it happened like this. Now I'm afraid that it'll happen again. Then you do an intervention. But the person without an experience says, supposing it happens like this, just talks abstract. You say that, let's come to experience and talk. Yeah? So avoid abstract concept, because it will lead to arguments, because both have no data. The coach has no data on that. The participant also has no data on that. So stay focused onto the goals. Commitment to do the homework genuinely and come. That's important, because your focus action becomes the homework. Creating inclusiveness, acknowledging each person by name. Now, be conscious of the sociogram of the group process. What I mean to say over here is, you have to keep watching. If you want, you can even put circles in your paper, in a journal, representing each person. You will see one person constantly responding to only one person when he or she talks, right? And some person will be isolated, so they'll never open their mouth. So you watch this and you just surface it to them, right? That by itself will, dissemble that. or it will become an intervention towards a better process. So you can look at one person and say, hey, John, I think we are 15 minutes into the group and I haven't heard your voice at all. So it brings out, a pattern that I've been observing over here is that, whenever Jennifer takes up an issue to talk about it, I find that Grace responds only when Jennifer speaks, but she is not responding when others are speaking. I'm just making a statement about that. Just say that and leave it. So this is a group processing skill where you are looking at the sociogram that is happening, how communication patterns are being picked up. This I already told. Invite isolates to speak and share. So when an exemplary sharing that you want others also to talk like that is done, you draw attention to this. You see the way that this person spoke, data-based, experience-based, that is a growth-oriented statement. Let's encourage ourselves to do that more. So you're showing this is how things have to be done. You have to be perceived supportive by all the members of the group. Nobody should have any anti towards you. So this is important. They have to feel that this is a co-creative process. Now, this is something counseling people already know, basic human skills in relationship. This is common whether it is coaching or whether it is going to be for mentoring. I would say only this is a common platform. But about this, the superstructure about this, for counseling, it becomes different. For coaching, it becomes different very clearly. So I think this I'll cut off. This I told already. So wishing you all the best, and I would like to take questions if there is time.
So Anand, one of the questions that has come up again and again is this: who gets to be a coach? What is the criterion for a coach?
Just an interest in the growth of other human beings, right? And I know of people who have no knowledge about human behavior, but they're just interested in people and contributing to the lives of people, and they have turned out to be great coaches. One of my mentee, he's an excellent coach. You know what's his qualification? BE electrical engineer, MBA finance. Now this is his qualification, and he is a top coach for CEOs and various other people. So there's no specific qualification as long as you're interested in contributing to the growth of people, which also means that you're interested in working with your own self. This will be the qualification.
Okay. One of the other questions is regarding confidentiality. When you're talking about group work and group coaching, and you're working individually with people in a group setting, what about confidentiality?
See, that's what I mean. We have to develop that trust in the group. So that's a major work of the group coach, inviting the trust, because there's so many group processes that are happening and people open up their lives, very deep things, which sometimes even things which they have not opened, their husbands or wives also. I've been in adult groups and they have done that. So it is the trust that you develop, the commitment that you make. So confidentiality, it's a risk, but then we haven't seen anything go, awry till now. I've been through many group processes, because what happens by the time you finish it, the sort of what I would say, the growth that you would have instilled in that person makes the person very responsible to himself and to others. So that is something that you have to work on.
Okay. Somebody asked a question. It's difficult to differentiate between a coach and a mentor when the coaching is specific, like sports, career, health. Sometimes it even resembles being a counselor. How does a coach refrain from overstepping his or her role? Where does coaching end?
Where does coaching end?
In the sense, where does the role of a coach end? Like, what would you call as the do nots of coaching?
What is it?
Don't like. What is overstepping the role of coaching?
When you become instructive, see, there are people who create blends. I know a lot of people who create a blend of both, right? So it is, you create your own style. That's how your uniqueness comes. But there are some people who are so adept at unraveling people just through questions. Their questioning power is so much, right? They don't need to be instructive, right? That's a very deep facilitative skill. But then at the same time, there are people, who see the struggle is on and the session timings are limited and this person has a resource to offer, they become instructive also. Quite a bit of case I found, and that's the reason there's another word that is formed. Initially, I used it and then removed it. It's called mentorship. Mentorship, MENT OACHN. So it's mentor coaching brought together. See, this book, it's laterally reversed, I think. It is called Coaching for Performance. This is acclaimed as the best book by John Whitmore, Sir John Whitmore. What I would suggest is the recent edition has been released recently. Initially, this book was costing $8,000. Now, I got this delivered yesterday. It just cost me 600 rupees because the new edition has come, more copies have been made. So I would encourage you, if you want to go beyond this youth session into depths of coaching, that book will help you to give you an understanding of what coaching is. And there are many types of coaching. There's also stakeholder coaching, very specific. Stakeholder coaching, there is a person called Marshall Goldsmith. He's written a book called What Got You Here Cannot Get You There. So what got you here cannot get you there. So this person takes his payment only after he shows the result. So he's so sure about the result. He takes a CEO and makes him to travel from place A to place B and shows that he has traveled with evidence and then gives his bill. But then it's very hefty. He charges $250,000, $250,000 for it. But when it matters, a CEO who's managing a business the size of $100 billion, this doesn't matter much. But that book is good if you want to read that book. It could be helpful.
Okay. Vetsa's asking a question as to how do we deal with people who are not regular to a group? We were talking about few sessions, 6 to 7 sessions, and then we go on. So what do you do with people who don't show up for a particular session?
See, first is that you want the group itself. I put a point where you create the group to create the norm for it. What shall we do? Right? If it is just missing out one class and you catch up, meeting up with others, okay. But if it becomes regular, then you have to check whether the person is interested or not and whether you'd like to discontinue. So again, encourage the group to take the decision and have it in a group context. You speak about it.
Okay. Okay. So we are out of questions. We do have a question which is more on the clinical side, so we're not going to touch it. So okay. So Hatali asked a question. What do you do if one of the group members is very destructive or not cooperating?
Or not to?
Not cooperating.
See, that is why we set the norms right at the start itself. Okay. Now, you have to give the choice to the person saying that how it's becoming obstructive to the group process as such. and have a chat with the person. If it is so, then ask the person. If he's not interested, leave the person. And I would personally, I will have a separate chat with that person if the person is destructive. And would you like to get into a personal coaching separately to work on the issues that he has? Because ultimately our interest is we are investing into the growth of that person. So that we shouldn't forget. Now, it's not a tools and techniques that we are trying to work it out. Ultimate goal is to see how the person can be empowered to becoming a more functional person. So you work towards this.
Okay. So thank you so much, Uncle Indesekaran. Thank you so much for your session on mentorship. The self-image session was so beautiful, and also group coaching. And I think a lot of our students are just, kind of like reeling in this concept of coaching and mentorship. You hear it everywhere. But just like I tell the group right now is that this is the framework. Okay, this is the framework for what is to happen the next 2 days. So this is the rules, the guidelines. How do you work with youngsters? So working in a group setting is something that we're talking about. I also want to ask a question with the brother is about group coaching. We spoke about. What about individual? If I have a client alone who's coming from a church setting and it's like, I need to process my purpose in my life and using this tool, how would I go about this?
I don't understand, because that was where we started with, individual coaching.
Yeah. Okay.
So use the method, because using the tool, as I told you, the tool is in two parts. So one is the tool assists you to set up and discover your call, right? And then it creates a strategy. The strategy implementation is the place where your coaching becomes very essential. The other one is only, helping the person to understand the tool and answer. But once it comes to implementation of the strategy, up to the planning of the strategy, the book helps you. Implementation of the strategy, whether it's individual coaching or a group coaching, will be there. So individual coaching means you have the format, setting it up and set the goal and review the process, give a completion. So you just follow that model.
Okay. So thank you so much, Anand. I think